Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling Nebius Group N.V., that AI infrastructure company that's been making waves.
Yeah, they've definitely been catching the eye of investors, especially with their ambitious plans in such a crowded space.
You got that right. So we've got a ton of research that you sent us on Nebius, and we're ready to get into it.
It's a fascinating company for sure.
It is. So let's just start with the basics. Like, what exactly does Nebius Group do?
Well, they're essentially laying the groundwork for AI applications.
Okay.
Think about, those massive clusters of GPUs, all the cloud services, all the really heavy-duty tech that's needed to train and run those, complex AI models that are just becoming more and more prevalent.
So, like, if AI is the engine, Nebius building, like, the roads and the fuel stations.
That's a great way to put it. And what's even more interesting is their origin story.
Okay. Tell me more.
They actually spun off from Yandex.
Yandex.
Yeah, it's sometimes called the Google of Russia.
Oh, wow. I see. So it sounds like they're trying to, like, leverage that background in search to kind of become a major player in this whole AI boom.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that market already kind of packed?
Oh, absolutely. You've got those giants like NVIDIA, Google, Amazon. They're all vying for that top spot. But Nebius is saying they have a unique edge.
What's that?
Cost efficiency. They're claiming that they can deliver GPU ownership and operation at a significantly lower cost, like 25% lower than the average provider.
Whoa. Okay, that's a bold claim. How are they pulling that off? Are they, like, cutting corners somewhere?
Not at all, actually. They've got a few key strategies they're using. First, they design and manufacture their own servers in-house.
Oh, so they cut out the middleman.
Exactly. Cuts out the middleman, cuts out the markup. Then second, they've developed a proprietary cloud software architecture that they say is super efficient. And then finally, they're laser focused on running their data centers as efficiently as possible.
Okay, so they're not just throwing money at the problem. They're being strategic about it. But even with lower costs, can they really compete with those mega corporations? Like the ones we were talking about?
It's a classic David and Goliath situation for sure.
Yeah.
But Nebius isn't just about raw computing power.
Yeah.
They've actually built this whole ecosystem of brands that all kind of work together.
Really?
Yeah, you've got Toloka AI for data services, which is super important for training AI models. And then there's Triple Ten, which is focused on tech education, basically building the workforce for the AI future.
It's like they're building their own little AI empire.
Yeah.
But is there a risk of them spreading themselves too thin with so many different things going on?
It's a fair point, but I think they see it as a way to create like a one-stop shop for all things AI.
I can see that.
I mean, they're even involved in autonomous driving technology with their brand of Reday.
No way.
And they have a stake in ClickHouse, which manages SQL databases.
Wow, they really are going all in on this AI thing. This is fascinating. But, okay, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the people behind all of this. Who's running the show over at Nebius?
Well, the CEO is Arkady Veloz.
Okay.
He's the co-founder of Yandex.
Oh, right.
So he's a pretty seasoned tech leader, proven track record of building successful companies. That said, the rest of the management team is relatively new, which could be seen as a risk or a source of, fresh ideas.
True. It's always a mixed bag when you've got that combo of experience and new blood. But speaking of risks, we did hear some rumblings about their corporate governance. What's the story there?
Yeah, there have been some concerns raised because Nebius hasn't fully complied with all the provisions of the Dutch Corporate Governance Code.
Interesting.
Yeah, they've stated that this doesn't impact their operations.
Okay.
But it is something that investors might want to dig into a little bit further.
Yeah, some mixed signals there for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. But, Veloz's history with Yandex seems pretty solid.
Yeah, absolutely. And his experience is a huge asset for Nebius. I mean, he's seen the tech world evolve firsthand and knows what it takes to build a company that can adapt and, keep thriving.
So we've got a strong leader, an ambitious vision, and a cost-efficient approach. It seems like Nebius has a lot going for it.
Yeah.
But before we get too excited, let's talk about the numbers. How is the company actually performing financially?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and I think you'll be surprised by some of the details.
Okay, now you've got me hooked.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear more after the break.
So before the break, we were talking about Nebius's leadership and their, kind of unique position in the AI infrastructure market. And now it's time to really dig into their financials.
Yeah, because in the end, the numbers tell the story, right? So give it to me straight. What's the financial picture looking like for Nebius?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest.
Okay.
Which isn't unusual for, a younger company in a rapidly growing industry.
Right.
On the one hand, their revenue growth has been seriously impressive.
Okay, so like how impressive are we talking?
In the third quarter of 2024 alone, they saw a 200% jump in revenue.
200%. Holy moly, that's huge. But you said it was a mixed bag. What's the catch?
Well, the catch is they're still not profitable.
Wow.
They're burning through cash, to fuel that rapid expansion. And that's definitely something investors are watching very closely.
Yeah, I can see why. So it's that classic startup dilemma, right? Grow super fast or focus on profits. But can they really keep this up if they're not actually making money?
It's a good question, but they do have a couple of things working in their favor.
Okay. Like what?
First, they have a pretty healthy cash position, like over $2 billion.
Okay. So a nice cushion to work with.
Right, exactly. Gives them some breathing room. And second, they have relatively low debt.
So not a ton of interest payments.
Exactly, which, can be a real drain on a young company.
Yeah, for sure. So they've got cash in the bank, not a ton of debt. Sounds promising, at least for now. But what about the long game? How are investors feeling about all of this?
Well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about market sentiment, because how the market perceives Nebius is, it's really crucial for their success.
Totally. Perception is reality, especially in the investing world. So what's the overall sentiment towards Nebius? Are investors bullish, bearish, or somewhere in between?
Right now, it seems to be cautiously optimistic, I'd say.
Wow.
Analysts have given the stock a buy rating with a price target of $51.
Okay, so some positive momentum there. What's driving that?
I think a big part of it is their strategic partnerships.
Okay.
They've teamed up with NVIDIA, a major player in the AI chip market.
So they're making friends in the right places.
Right. And they've even secured a deal with Grubhub to deploy those, autonomous food delivery robots you see around.
Oh, yeah, those things are pretty cool. Wait, you said sentiment was positive? Didn't their stock take a hit recently?
Yeah, it did. There was a bit of a roller coaster when DeepSeek, one of their competitors, released a new AI model that's potentially, cheaper and more efficient.
Right, yeah, so a little reality check from the market.
Exactly. That news spooked some investors and led to a dip in Nebius' stock price.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about the investors who are already on board? Are they holding strong?
Well, interestingly, short interest is pretty low.
Oh, okay.
Which suggests that most investors aren't betting against Nebius.
So no mass exodus, but are people buying in?
The auctions activity has been kind of mixed, some bullish, some bearish trades.
So mixed bag on that front.
Yeah, pretty much. It seems like the market is still trying to figure out, where Nebius fits in the whole AI landscape.
For sure. So a mixed bag when it comes to investor behavior. It sounds like people are still trying to figure out where Nebius fits in the grand scheme of the AI world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big part of that is understanding, who's really holding the reins, not just in terms of management, but also the ownership structure.
Right, because who owns the company can tell us a lot about its direction and stability.
Yeah.
So let's break that down. What's the ownership structure like at Nebius?
Well, to start, insider ownership is fairly significant. Arkady Velos, the CEO, he directly owns over 13% of the company's shares.
Wow, that's a big chunk.
Yep.
He's putting his money where his mouth is. But what about the rest of the ownership? Is it pretty diverse, or are there a few big players calling the shots?
It's actually not highly concentrated at all.
Okay.
The top 25 shareholders, they own about 34% of the company. So, there isn't one single entity with a controlling stake.
That's good to know. It's just a little more balance and less vulnerability to, the whims of a single investor.
Right.
What about those big institutional investors like mutual funds, hedge funds? Are they buying into Nebius?
Institutional investors currently hold a relatively small percentage of the company's shares.
Okay.
But that's pretty typical for a company at this stage. As Nebius matures and gains more traction, we'll likely see that institutional ownership increase.
So a pretty balanced ownership landscape for now. But before we get too comfortable, let's circle back to that risk assessment. We talked about the corporate governance issue and the competitive landscape. What else should investors be thinking about?
To really get the full picture, it's helpful to think in terms of a SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Ooh, I love a good SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
Let's hear it. What are Nebius's biggest strengths?
I'd say one of their biggest strengths is their brand recognition. Stemming from those Yandex roots, gives them a certain level of credibility and trust in the tech world. And of course, as we discussed, their cost-efficient infrastructure is a major advantage.
Right. And we can't forget about their focus on sustainability with their energy-efficient data center in Finland.
Absolutely. That's becoming more and more important for investors who are, looking beyond just financial returns.
So strong brand, cost efficiency, sustainability.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty solid foundation. But every company has its weaknesses. What are some of Nebius's vulnerabilities?
Well, as we touched on earlier, their reliance on the Nebius AI platform is a bit of a double-edged sword.
Hmm.
If something goes wrong with that platform, it could have a major impact on their whole business.
It's like putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Exactly. And then, of course, their profitability or lack thereof is a concern.
Yeah, we talked about that.
While that revenue growth is impressive, they need to start turning a profit, to really show that long-term sustainability.
Okay, so strengths and weaknesses checked off.
Hmm.
What about opportunities? What's out there that Nebius can capitalize on?
Well, the most obvious opportunity is the sheer size and growth potential of the AI market.
Right.
And it's massive, and it's only getting bigger. And Nebius, with their, comprehensive ecosystem, they're well-positioned to grab a good chunk of that pie.
Sounds like they're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But what about threats? What could really derail their success?
The biggest threat is, without a doubt, competition.
Right. They are up against some heavy hitters.
They're going up against some of the biggest and most innovative companies in the world, like NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, you name it.
Those are some formidable opponents.
Where?
Anything else keeping those Nebius execs up at night?
Well, the regulatory landscape for AI is constantly evolving, and navigating, all those legal and ethical complexities is going to be crucial for them.
For sure. For sure.
New regulations could pop up, and significantly impact their business model or increase their costs.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
Balancing ambition with, the realities of a complex and constantly changing market.
Mm-hmm.
So with all that in mind, should our listener be rushing out to buy Nebius stock?
Well, before we jump to any conclusions, there's one more thing I think is worth considering, and it might make you think twice before, making any rash decisions.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We explored Nebius's business model, their financials market, sentiment, ownership structure, and even did a SWOT analysis. But you said there was one more thing to consider.
Right, and it's a big one. We talked about the fierce competition in the AI infrastructure market, but what we haven't really dug into is the speed of innovation in this field. It's relentless.
Okay, so things are moving fast.
Yeah.
But isn't that true of most tech sectors these days?
Yeah, for sure. But the AI world is evolving at a particularly crazy pace. What's cutting edge today might be obsolete tomorrow. And that leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, the potential for disruption.
So you're saying even with all its strength, Nebius could be blindsided by some new technology or innovation?
Exactly. Think about it. Nebius has built its entire business around its current AI platform. But what if a new, even more cost-effective and powerful technology comes along? What if someone cracks the code on training AI models with way less computing power?
That would be a total game changer. It'd be like the jump from those clunky desktop computers to sleek smartphones. Suddenly, the old way just doesn't cut it anymore.
Exactly. And that's the risk every company in this space faces. Even the big guys like NVIDIA and Google. The potential for disruption is always there.
So what does all this mean for our listener who's trying to decide whether to invest in Nebius?
Well, that's a question only they can answer after, weighing all the information we've discussed and doing their own research. Nebius is a company with tons of potential, but it's also operating in a very volatile and unpredictable market.
All right, high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
But hopefully this deep dive has given our listener a good starting point for their own analysis.
Absolutely. Here's a final thought to consider, though. With AI technology evolving so rapidly, what kind of innovations might we see in the next few years that could even disrupt Nebius's business model?
Wow, that's a great question to think about. It's a good reminder that in the world of tech, the only constant is change. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of Nebius Group helpful and interesting.
And as always, we encourage you to do your own research and due diligence before making any investment decisions. You can find links to all the sources we used for this episode in the description below.
And if you're looking for more AI-powered analysis and stock suggestions, be sure to subscribe to Stock Analytics AI on YouTube. Our AI models are constantly learning and evolving. But remember, they're not perfect, so please do your own research before making any investment decisions.
Until next time, keep diving deeper.